far beyond these walls in this event. The next moderator on this event is a very good friend of mine, Mark Yakinich, who I met probably 15 years ago when he spoke at as one of the startups at the New Jersey Tech Meetup, which was the very early days of this sort of activity.
And I won.
And he won. That's true. He did win. And so we've become very good friends since. He's on my board. He's now a partner at Better Future Labs. He's got an extensive history, an impressive history in tech, being on the founding launch team of Hulu. He's led a variety of digital media businesses. Several have been sold. He's an investor. He's now leading an incredible process around Better Future Labs. So it brings me a lot of pleasure to welcome on stage Mark Yakinich, partner of Better Future Labs. You go up.
Thanks for that kind introduction, Aaron. And I think it's impossible to have a conversation about AI without thinking about ChatGPT or OpenAI. So we're very lucky today to have Mike Wilner, go-to-market for startups at OpenAI, join us. And
thank you.
We're going to talk about world domination by OpenAI, right? Because that's what you guys are doing.
Yeah, that's what I'm approved to talk about.
That's what I thought. Sweet. Whip out the cameras. Okay, so let's start out. Just give everybody a little bit of a background on yourself and the go-to-market function at OpenAI and how you think about your work.
Yeah, so my name is Mike Wilner. I'm on the startup team at OpenAI. My whole career has been in startups. I've founded 2 companies, been an investor. I worked at AWS for a bunch of years helping startups, doing a very similar role to what I do today. Really quickly, who here uses ChatGPT? Cool. Who here has used an AI product that is not ChatGPT, not Gemini, not Claude, but is like some other product that is using AI under the hood? Great. So on the startup team at OpenAI, what we do is we help startups who are building those AI applications that are leveraging our models. So a lot of what we do is helping those startups actually build their products. So if you see products out there like Cursor, or a lot of those mainstream AI products under the hood, they are using OpenAI models, Anthropic models, et cetera. So we help them build those products. But a big part of our role is also serving as the connective tissue between what those startups are building in the real world and our product and research teams. So we get to work with startups. They find ways in which our models are not sufficient for actually building products for customers. We take that feedback to product and research. They train the models to be better at those tasks, and it helps us make our models better. It also makes it possible for startups to grow and build products that are really on the bleeding edge of what's possible with AI.
Great. So at Better Future Labs, we focus on building agentic, verticalized AI applications. And something we think about every day is, what are the spaces that we can and should occupy that aren't occupied by the frontier models? So to be clear, OpenAI can do so much, it's so capable, and that capability is expanding so quickly. So how do we navigate that path to be the right partner or potential competitor with OpenAI?
Yeah, I think there's a healthy dose of both, right? I think like at a high level, when you think of OpenAI as a company, we only have so much bandwidth to go super deep with customers, right? So when you think about selling into like some vertical space like accounting, right? Yeah, we can do some stuff with accounting firms, but not many of them. We don't have a ton of people to go deep on that. And so I think as long as you're building products deeply with customers and actually like working with them on the actual AI implementation, you're going deeper than OpenAI can go with a lot of those customers. And so I think where we see a lot of startups differentiating is basically building like more vertical applied AI. What I would not advise if you're building a startup today is building like a simple wrapper around ChatGPT, or maybe building like ChatGPT plus a feature on top of our models, because as you've seen, like we launched a browser just this week, right? The progress at OpenAI is very fast. If you're trying to build something for consumers that is like very broad and horizontal, then it does feel a little more competitive. But if you're going super deep with specific customers, it is more differentiated.
So by show of hands, who knows what a wrapper is on ChatGPT? Let's just define that for us.
Yeah, I mean, it's a crass way of just saying, building some application on top of our API And it basically is like ChatGPT, but has like a little bit of different features that are a little customized. But overall, the application is not truly different. And I think wrappers are very susceptible to very small, improvements on ChatGPT, resulting in them having no more moat.
So what I hear you saying then is go deep on the vertical side. Try and develop a combination of specific industry context as well as potentially unique data to create a defendable, not just a defendable moat, but real difference from what the frontier models themselves are working on.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges for frontier models is, and just companies like OpenAI, is going into businesses and enterprises and like getting out the context that is actually needed, that is like in the different unique business workflows, right? It's not as easy as just like, oh, connect Google Drive, and now you have all the context for a business to actually do things at scale. That work of getting really deep into an existing business's workflows, whether it's like AI for accounting, you have to go super deep into where accountants are actually getting transaction records. And there's just like a lot of like work that is like last mile work that is essential. And that's where you can focus.
So one of the terms we hear in the industry is something called forward deployed engineers. The idea that you're sending an engineer into an organization to dig deep and understand those things. Is the role of an engineer really changing then in the core of a business and building these applications?
I think there are a couple engineering roles that are interesting. I think you're seeing internal context engineers. So we're seeing like new startups started today are truly AI native. And that means they're able to do way more with way less people. And one of the roles we're seeing emerge is they're hiring engineers just to like manage their internal company knowledge and data. Because if you organize and architect that company knowledge and data in a specific way, you can automate a lot of business workflows, right? So that is one type of engineer that is emerging. I would say you do have like machine learning and AI engineers that have a more interesting role today because they're the ones running experiments and doing evals. And then like basically every engineer, software engineer, is becoming an applied AI engineer, right? Working with the model providers like OpenAI, like Anthropic, figuring out how to implement them in the field. And then the last one, you mentioned this, is like forward deployed engineers. Who knows what that means? Cool. Has anyone heard of Palantir? So Palantir kind of invented this idea of like forward deployed engineering. VCs used to hate the idea of services in like venture-backed companies, but Palantir ended up saying, you know what, we're going to deploy people on site to work with clients, and that's just the way this has to be, and they were wildly successful. Now with AI, there is such a big gap between what the models are capable of and the rate at which enterprises are adopting and implementing AI, that the best applied AI startups that I work with, they're investing shockingly early in forward deployed teams. So, I work with like an AI for accounting startup, and they are going on site with accounting firms and doing hackathons and like watching over their shoulders what the accountants' workflows are so that they can figure out how to get their product to work. And I think we have a lot of AI startups that have been born over the past 2 years that may be doing pretty well, but it is really hard to get things to actually work, like actually be implemented at an enterprise level. And there are far fewer companies that have figured that out, and it's the ones that have really invested in forward deployment.
So it's clear the engineering function is transforming, but in our experience, and I think most recent startups experience, you used the term AI native before.
Yeah.
If you're AI native, well, first of all, I'd like you to define it, but it's this fundamentally transforms the way that we work.
Yeah, I think, well, generally speaking, like 5 years ago, when you thought about like, okay, how should I think about marketing? How should I think about staffing these different functions? You think about like the roles and the people that you need. Today, being AI first means like you first think about like how can AI do as much of this as possible, and then where do I actually need humans? And so, AI native startups that are being born today are really reimagining just like how to build companies. They're going from what used to be like 2-week engineering sprints to like 2-day engineering sprints. They're moving at really like an unprecedented velocity. And that comes from like first asking the question of like where can I actually, like where do I need humans in the loop versus like let's operate from a default state of we think AI can do this. And I think that is the mindset change.
So is there any way to express like a quantum on the, because ultimately this comes down to the amount of resources that are required to build a business. It seems like there's a movement towards a lot more progress with a lot less money for the investors in the room. This changes the calculus on portfolios, funding, fund size, round size, et cetera.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any like hard data to share, but like some heuristics, like we're seeing companies go from, no product to a couple $1 million in annual revenue in like 6 months, right? That used to be kind of unheard of. That's what we're seeing in the venture community too, where like one of the big metrics that VCs are looking at as a signal of like how good a team is time to a certain threshold of revenue. And so I think like, yeah, at a high level, things are just moving so quickly, and it's definitely the earliest stages. Like I hosted a hackathon 2 weeks ago because we have a new model called Codex, which is really great for coding. And the people in a weekend were able to accomplish way more than I ever expected. And it's because, there's kind of no excuse now. If you want to build a product, then in a weekend, like you could build it with AI, right? So time to like MVP has been drastically collapsed, but then especially if you're building an AI native organization, time to all of the subsequent milestones is continuing to collapse.
So it's interesting because what happens is the barrier to build is lower, right? But distribution barriers are as high as ever because there's so much more competition in the market and things move so much more quickly.
Yeah.
AI must influence the way that people are going to market from a distribution perspective. Is there anything that you looked at and said, wow, that's really smart, or this is the way things should be done?
Yeah, from a distribution perspective, I mean, a lot of people are talking about like how can I be the company or product that is recommended in a ChatGPT query. There's a whole a whole market being born around just like helping optimize that.
Yeah, how's that going? How's that business going?
Well, it's no comment. I'll move on. But I think the thing that you're getting at is it is now easier than ever to build. So the question becomes like, what do you build and for who? And I think the answer to that has to be some domain expertise or like market insight that usually comes from someone spending 15 years in accounting or spending 15 years in logistics and having some deep market insight and being really close to customers. And so I think what it is doing, because the building part is being, especially within like vertical applied AI, is being commoditized a little bit. What it comes back to is like relationships and market insights and like depth of relationships and intel there. And so that's where, when we look at startups and when I put my investor hat on and look at startups, the biggest thing I look at now is like, can they build quickly? That's more of like a yes or no. And then everything else is just like, do they have relationships or a unique way to go to market? And when it comes to like vertical applied AI, it's more relational than like some hacky go-to-market motion. But I do think like proximity to customers is one of the most important things.
So one of the things we look at a lot is the sales and marketing function specifically in these startups. And it's been completely transformed by a combination of OpenAI and N8N and various kind of automation tools. Is that an area where you see a lot of growth in the future, the whole kind of go-to-market distribution function for building startups, those tools to sell and to do account management, et cetera?
Yeah, I think like it's getting more and more efficient. You've got companies like Clay that are doing really interesting things now with AI. So I think like go-to-market engineering is almost like a new role too when we talk about the different engineering roles. But yeah, I think like it is interesting to think about where this goes, because what happens when everyone has these amazing tools that help find the right people at the right time and personalize messages, I kind of think you fall back to like, again, like physical proximity to customers and relationships becoming even more of a premium. Because there's a future coming where like you can send the perfect message to all the right people and then what?
Yeah, so for all of the non-technical people in the room who are doing that, outbound touch, sales and marketing relationships, in my opinion, at least matter more than ever, or will continue to matter, really matter.
Yeah.
Any comment there?
Yeah, I agree. It's like, no matter how bad someone is at writing emails now, they can write an excellent outbound email with AI, right? So in a world where everyone is excellent at outbound sales, like what then matters? And I think it does come down to like actual relationships.
So obviously we're sitting at Nokia Bell Labs. Bell Labs, I'm sure everybody know, incredibly storied. It's the home of innovation in the United States. The Silicon Valley, before there was a Silicon Valley in the United States, was right here, right at Thierry's doorstep. In New Jersey, we have so many strengths, Nokia Bell Labs being one of them. As you think about our ability as a region, as a state, to be competitive with important strengths, should we be doubling down anywhere? Where do you think we should be building?
Yeah, so I think about this a lot. I'm based in New York, and all of my colleagues are in San Francisco, and I take every opportunity I can to like talk trash about them in San Francisco.
Nice.
But I think like there are three things that really matter when thinking about like a city's unique advantage. One is like mindset and just general mentality. The other is like talent and proximity to talent, and the other is proximity to customers and like what that informs. And when you think about that through the context of New York and New Jersey, from a mindset perspective, especially relative to the Bay Area, the Bay Area is like pie in the sky, horizontal applications, growth at all costs. New York is very pragmatic, and like it's a lot of operators who are like thinking about like how do you make something profitable, how do you make it work, how do you make this a good business. That's definitely like deep in the fabric of New York relative to San Francisco. So I think that's one thing. I think when it comes to talent, in New York and New Jersey, you don't have as much density of like research talent as you might have in like San Francisco. But you do have a ton of engineering talent, right? And then when it comes to proximity to customers, the third thing, in New Jersey, you have like healthcare and life sciences, manufacturing, logistics. And in New York, and then by extension, New Jersey a little bit, you've got financial services and accounting. And so when you think about those verticals, what I think, if I think of the companies 5 to 10 years from now, they're going to be looked back at as like, oh, these were the breakout AI companies to come from New Jersey and New York. It's probably going to be vertical applied AI for manufacturing, logistics, life sciences, right? Those are companies where like it is genuinely a unique advantage to build those companies here relative to San Francisco because of all of those things. Whereas, San Francisco is always gonna be pretty far ahead in like research, horizontal applications, dev tools, right? Because all of, tech is there. So if you're selling to tech, it is the place to be, but there's a lot more here.
So one of the things that we see in the press right now is the fact that while AI is massive and it's going to have this big impact, there's this sense that maybe it actually hasn't met the expectations that are promised. Any comments on that? There have been studies that said, well, there's only 4% of pilots are actually working out for large enterprises. What do you think about that whole thing?
Well, some of that research is a little flawed, but the overall sentiment is like not too far off, right? There is a pretty big gap between what models are capable of today and like what we've seen so far in terms of like application within like businesses and enterprises. I think one of the things we talk about internally a little bit is if AI research stopped today, like right now, no more progress, no more new models, there would still be like 10 years of growth in AI. And it's because the capabilities are so far ahead of how they've been applied. And that's why we're really bullish of like the startup business at OpenAI, where we're helping the startups that are actually figuring out how to build applications that can actually be deployed within enterprises, right? Because there's just so much room for growth and so much opportunity in just taking the existing model capabilities and applying them. Now, all that being said, model capabilities are also increasing at a very fast rate. But I think it's less of it's not a sign of like AI is not good. It's just that we're still figuring out how to apply it, still figuring out how to drive adoption, and that's going to just take time.
So if so much is happening in the market, why are you at OpenAI? Why don't you just go build a startup?
I think it comes back to what I said around like, needing like a distribution advantage in relationships. Like I don't have like a specific vertical that I've spent like 10 years in where I just know the accounting space or manufacturing logistics space super well to be able to go and build something in there. And so, I told you beforehand, the real answer is like I've done a couple of startups and I'm a little tired. But
Totally respect that answer.
But the more thoughtful answer is like, I don't know what my vertical insight is, and so better just like be at OpenAI. But if I had to build something, this comes back to the theme around just like the gap between model capabilities and adoption. I have friends who are running like AI implementation consultancies, and they are doing extremely well because there's just so much demand of like, okay, we know the models can do so much. How do we implement it here, right? And there's just a massive market for that. The whole thing around forward deployed engineers. How do you actually get things to work in practice? Like that is where there's a lot of opportunity.
So Mike, thank you so much for answering those questions. Thank you for coming and spending time with us. We appreciate it. And have a good day all.
Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Mike. That was awesome. Appreciate it. That's a perfect tee up, actually, before we have our break, which is right after the next talk. Thanks, Mike. I like how you're like, I've had